Hey everybody, this is Mr. Moffman again with another APUSH video. We're taking a look today at topic 7.14, World War II and post-war diplomacy. Now, last time we talked about how the big three, made up of the leaders of the U.S., Britain, and Soviet Union, FDR, Churchill, and Stalin respectively, are going to come up with strategies to win the war in the early 1940s, and then at Yalta start to come up with an idea of a post-war world moving forward. But of course, as we mentioned, that's certainly going to come with quite a few challenges. And amongst those challenges is going to involve a reshuffling of some of the leadership once the war ends, at least in Europe, by the summer of 1945. On April 12th of that year, FDR is going to pass away, which is then going to allow Harry Truman to go from being an obscure Missouri senator to a bit of an obscure vice president of the United States, and now becoming president of the United States, and now having to bring to an end the most horrific war in human history and work with the other Allied leaders, which also showed some degrees of transitioning. By the summer of 1945, Winston Churchill was now out of power. The Liberals were now in control of Great Britain, with Clement Attlee now as Prime Minister. But of course, some things just don't change over time, and that's going to be Stalin being the dictator of the Soviet Union. Now, with this new version of the Big Three together, we're going to see the Big Three meeting in Potsdam, Germany, following Germany's surrender, to talk further about what the future of Germany is going to be looking like. And here's the lineup of the new Big Three. Clement Attlee here on the left, Harry Truman in the middle, and old Joseph Stalin there on the right. Now, understand that all of these Allied countries are concerned about the idea of a post-war Germany. We learned the lesson last time that if you just punish Germany and kind of leave it to its own devices, that's only going to breed trouble. So you can't use the Treaty of Versailles model this time around. So the decision was that Germany has suffered, and because of the realities of the war, will continue to suffer to some degree moving forward. Economically, it has to completely rebuild. It's going to have new government. It's going to have to deal with the legacy of the Holocaust. I mean, the challenges of a post-war Germany are going to be, just unbelievable. And so the idea being is that you can't just let Germany just kind of fend for itself out there. And so you're going to see the Big Three here agree to a very, very interesting decision to, divide up Germany into 4 separate zones. Take a look at this map. This is going to be the plan of that's going to be coming from Potsdam. You're going to see 4 different occupation zones be carved out of Germany, which is going to be smaller than it was pre-World War II. As you can see here, the zones are going to be divided up amongst not only the Big Three, but also France. You can see the zones in blue here closest to France will be occupied by France. The northwest portion, which is closest to Britain, that'll be occupied by the British forces. Eastern Germany, closest to the Soviet Union, that will be occupied by the Soviet Union. And the southern zone here is going to be occupied by the United States. So the plan is to divide up Germany into 4 pieces. Now, you'll also note over here in Berlin, the old capital of Germany, which is now going to be inside the Soviet zone, there's going to be a decision to occupy Berlin jointly as well. So it's going to be kind of interesting. The nation of Germany will be occupied by 4 Allied countries jointly, and then so will Berlin. There'll be 4 Berlin zones, like there'll be 4 German zones. Now, the plan ostensibly is to, have each of these Allied countries oversee the rebuilding of Germany over the next however many few years, with the plan eventually for the Allies to come back together, work out a plan to have a national set of elections, to have a new post-war Germany that is going to be in line with the values of the Allied countries, and most importantly, not be a threat in the future. Now, this is going to be, an interesting plan, and conceivably on the surface, a good plan. But the plan does not quite work out as many, including the United States, would have liked. But of course, we'll get into more of that when we get into the Cold War itself. Now, to wrap up this horrific chapter in human history, let's be aware of the effects of this war, and there will be many. You know, when we talk about this being the deadliest war, most destructive war in all of human history, you can't overstate that. Take a look at this stats. I mean, it's just staggering. You know, World War I cost upwards of 20 million lives, and that was seen as a number so horrific that you could never duplicate that we could never allow for that to be duplicated again. Well, we more than duplicate that. We far exceeded 75 million people killed globally in this conflict. I mean, that is a staggering amount of people. You know, back then the United States only had about 200 million people total. So that just gives you a sense of how many people we're talking about. And approximately 1 in 3 fatalities in the war. Oh my goodness, take a look at that. 25 million Soviets. The Soviet Union will clearly pay the highest price of any nation in the war. The atrocities will be brutal that the Germans inflicted on the Soviets, both military and especially civilian. And this, of course, also kind of gives you a little bit more of a sense of, you know, maybe why Stalin is going to be so aggressive in trying to have influence in Eastern Europe. Because think about it, in the 2 previous generations now, you've had Germany invade, you know, Russia or the Soviet Union from the West. And so we're giving you a little bit of a preview for what's going to happen in the Cold War. But bottom line, as we've already alluded to, Eastern Europe is going to be doomed to basically be communist buffer states for the Soviet Union moving forward. And maybe this stat right here kind of gives you a little bit more of an idea as to kind of why the Soviet Union wanted to do that. But here closer to home, we also pay a pretty high price. We're going to see over 400,000 American soldiers killed in this conflict. You know, short of the Civil War, the deadliest conflict in American history. Now, note that even though the United States is going to pay a high price in blood, we are going to be exceptionally fortunate amongst the Allied countries to not have to do very much to have to rebuild. Yeah, we had to rebuild Pearl Harbor. There were some parts of the Aleutian Islands that were occupied for a brief moment of time by the Japanese. But we don't really have to rebuild much at all compared to what the Allies are going to be doing. The other allies, Britain, France, Germany, eventually, other powerful countries like Germany, Italy, they're all going to have to rebuild. And it's going to take a full generation to rebuild. But we don't have to worry about that. And note that even though we're going to be spending a lot of money that we didn't quite have at the moment to win this war, due to the fact that we now have nuclear weapons, the only one in the world that has nuclear weapons, due to the fact that we don't really have to rebuild at all. We just kind of keep on moving as a country where the rest of the world is kind of taking a step back. And with the fact that we have now unquestioned the #1 economy in the world, and it's only going to grow because we don't have to rebuild our economy. It's just going to continue to grow, and boy, will it expand in the next 10 to 15 years. The United States is now going to be earning the title of superpower. Now, note, we're not going to be the only superpower that will emerge out of World War II. So will the Soviet Union. And you might think, well, how could the Soviet Union emerge as a superpower? They had 25 million people that died in this conflict. They've got plenty of rebuilding to do. They don't, necessarily have the strongest economy, so why would that be the case? Well, 2 reasons. A, they do have a very powerful military. Other than the United States, the Soviet Union clearly has the most powerful military on Earth once the war is over. And as we'll talk later, the United States having a monopoly on nuclear weapons isn't going to last very long. Within just a couple of years, the Soviets will have that same nuclear capacity. And so now that's kind of put us on the same level playing field, at least militarily speaking. They'll never really be on our, be a real competitor economically. But from a military perspective, from a technological perspective, militarily, they certainly are going to be rivals. And of course, that's going to lead to what is going to eventually become the Cold War that will define the next 45 years of global history. But, rather than end this this unit on, the challenge of the Cold War moving forward, let's focus in on something a little bit more positive. At the end of World War I, we know that, Woodrow Wilson had the best of intentions. He truly believed that he had the formula to promote, a permanent global peace. And, the centerpiece of that plan, that 14-point plan, was the League of Nations, an international peacekeeping body. But because of American, concerns over sovereignty and a desire to return to isolationism, we never join. The League of Nations becomes hamstrung, and it never is able to stand up to any real challenges that are going to face the globe militarily after World War I, hence World War II. Well, now that's going to be different. We know that, back at Yalta, there's going to be a plan to create a new peacekeeping organization, and that will come to fruition. At the end of World War II, we will see the creation, as you can see here, of the United Nations, a new, modern, and far more improved version of what had been the initial League of Nations. And notably, show you the difference, not only will the United States join, as you can see pictured here, you can see Harry Truman on the far left, we are going to headquarter the League of Nations. So maybe Woodrow Wilson's dreams, do come true. He's just not going to be able to see it in his lifetime. But we do join, we are the leaders of a post-war peacekeeping international body, the League of Nations. Now, as we'll learn later on, the UN is certainly not perfect. There's going to be challenges. But certainly the world is a safer place by having the UN rather than not having the UN for sure. So, with that being said, we'll leave it there for now, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.